All right, you're good to go.
Okay, so we reconvened to open session at 7:03 p.m. Report of action taken in closed. I think that the board refined the goal dimensions for the ED in both the recent board workshop and then again in closed session we finalized some of these percentages. The high-level dimensions of the ED evaluation are the following areas: academic achievement, school climate, communications, organizational leadership, development and partnerships, fiscal management, and professional growth. And those in that same order: academic achievement were weighted at 20%, school climate at 10, communications 15, organizational leadership at 20, developmental partnership at 10, fiscal management at 15, and professional growth at 10. Of course, each of those dimensions has been ranked and weighted by the board. Our mid-year evaluation process will be spearheaded by myself with Dr. Amy Smith on the board as well, participating in that evaluation with David Bartley. And then, of course, we'll report back to the full board about how Amy's doing in all of those categories. So we're obviously very excited to have Amy in this role, and we're very excited to have the good work beginning of helping communicate what the overarching objectives are for success in the ED position. So there you go. This is all good info, and we hope to hear lots of good things from Amy and from our constituency at large about those items. So, okay, flag salute. Paul, would you mind? Pretty please.
I'll wait for the flag to come up.
Wait for my flag.
Okay. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Amy, do we have any input on agendized items?
We do not.
Okay. So public hearings then, 2021 to 2024, proposed local control and accountability plan for OPA is the LCAP. Saddleback Valley, it's recommended the board president open the public hearing, determine if members of the public have submitted requests to speak on the item, and after hearing any speakers, formally close the public hearing. So let's open the public hearing.
Okay, we do not have any speakers for this item.
Okay, if we don't have any speakers, then I'll formally close the public hearing. Which leads us to item B, proposed budget for Saddleback Valley. It's recommended that the board president open the public hearing, determine if members of the public have submitted requests to speak on the item, and after hearing any speakers, formally close the public hearing. I would like to open the public hearing on proposed budget for OPA Saddleback Valley.
And we have no speakers for this item either.
Okay, we're going to formally close the public hearing on item B. Item C, proposed local control and accountability plan for OPA South Orange County. It's recommended that the board president open the public hearing, determine if members of the public have submitted requests to speak on the item, and after hearing any speakers, formally close the public hearing. I would like to open the public hearing for item C, proposed local control and accountability plan for OPA South Orange County.
Sort of like Groundhog Day, we have no speakers for this public hearing either.
Okay, well then I'd like to formally close the public hearing on item C. Item D, proposed budget for OPA South Orange County. I'd like to formally open the public hearing.
Again, no speakers.
Okay, I'd like to formally close the public hearing on item D, proposed budget for OPA South Orange County. Which leads us to item number 7, items for consent. Approve the minutes from the regular meeting of the Oxford Preparatory Academy Board of Directors on May 27, 2021. It's recommended that the board approve consent item A.
I make a motion that we approve consent item A.
Okay, may I have a second, pretty please?
Amy seconds.
Amy second, super. Okay, we'll do a roll call. So Danelli,
Aye.
Jackson, I, Paul,
Aye.
Amy Smith,
Aye.
and Delight Travis.
Aye.
Okay, this motion carries unanimously. Executive Director Report, item number 8.
All right, well, we are just about 5 days away from the end of this 2020-2021 school year. It's been a very unique school year, unlike any other, but we've done some amazing things. Our staff and families and students have really gotten through it. We were reviewing our test data, and our students have made pretty similar progress looking at our iReady results, our MDTP results. They've made pretty similar progress to what they would have made in a normal school year. And so considering all of the different issues and the switches, starting out the year virtually and finishing off last year virtually and then going to a hybrid schedule, it's just, it's a testament to how exceptional our staff and our students and our families are to really be able to finish this strong, considering all of the obstacles this year. So I'm so proud of everyone. And I just want to thank everyone for everything that they've done, and just such an amazing school year. Now that we're looking forward to finally next school year and being able to really start planning and knowing that we're going to all be back together again in person for a full day of instruction, finally. We're really, as a staff, looking at things that we can do to really make next year even more amazing. And, kind of looking at things that we had to give up during COVID and during virtual learning and hybrid learning, and how we can bring those things back, but bring them back knowing all of the great things that we've actually learned through this experience. So really bringing things back, but bringing things back better than they were in the past. So really, my message out tomorrow that everybody will get is really going to be kind of outlining, kind of an inauguration.
Spoiler alert.
Outlining what we have in store for next school year. But just knowing that we really have finished off this year strong, and we're really excited for the things that we've done and looking forward to an amazing year next year. So I will pass it over to our esteemed board members.
Okay, so director reports. Let's go in reverse order, pretty please. How about Delight Travis?
I would just like to echo what Amy mentioned. I think it's been an extremely difficult year for everybody in education. And I think that, it's been amazing to see what our teachers have done, our administration has done, our students, as well as all the parent support. So just thank you to everybody for everything you've done.
Okay, Amy Smith.
Yeah, I'll keep it simple and just echo that. Congratulations to staff, students, parents, perseverance and still excellence has been achieved. So it's great to hear that. And a big congratulations and farewell to our departing 8th graders. And we wish you all the best and always here to support you. So congratulations with that as well.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, I echo everybody's thoughts. Have a wonderful summer to all the students and teachers. Well-deserved rest. Administration, I guess we'll be still working with you through summer. No rest for you guys, I guess. But and again, congratulations to the 8th grade teachers. On a different topic, just a quick update on strategy work. We did the focus groups. I gave an update on that last time, and one of the things that intrigued us quite a bit was this old OPA. And so, one of the things that we're considering is getting some of the old, the original OPA parents who've been here for a long time and have a focus group with them And so more on that as we progress along. We'll do that as part of the strategy and development committee. So thank you.
Okay. I would say what a year. What a super fun, exciting curveball roller coaster year. And like Amy, I'm very excited about looking forward to new and better and refined and honed and focused and less wild things going on in the periphery and more super fun, awesome things going on in the classroom and on the campuses. So yay. All right. How about you, Ms. Dinelli?
I just want to echo everything. We're just so appreciative of all the staff and teachers and administration who have just worked hard and diligently to make things happen, even in this crazy time. Also, we have, I think it's like 14 or something like that, students from kindergarten who have been at OPA who are leaving, who have been here from kindergarten through 8th grade. And so it's just a big milestone for everyone. But I just appreciate all the families who've kind of stuck it out too, and came in and out and gave us a second chance and came to our school. And we're just very appreciative of everybody who's at OPA, who makes it happen every single day and are committed. And we do definitely have a committed administration and committed parents. And so we're just very grateful for all of you. And then I also wanted to thank the Strategy and Academic Outcomes Committee chairmen and who have just made these new committees happen. And we're just looking forward and looking up, and I'm just so grateful that they're willing to take all this on, and governance as well. So anyway, so thanks to everybody. It's been a great year so far, and look forward to more.
Okay. So that leads us to items for presentation. Item A, the 2021-2022 proposed budgets for OPA Saddleback Valley and OPA South Orange County. So Ms. Parikh.
Yeah, let me pull that up. Okay, so in terms of the presentation today, we included a multi-year projection, but it is the public hearing today, but for approval in 2 weeks, we're looking at just approving the fiscal year 22 budget. So those are the numbers that we would be using as the budget for next year. So in terms of the multi-year for SOC, overall looking healthy with positive operating incomes in each of the future years. This year we had $1.1 million operating income. Next year we're budgeting proposed budget at $843,000. The fund balance is almost at 60% of expenses, so a really solid fund balance in terms of long-term stability. And overall, as we look into the future years, you can see that operating income does decline as expenses continue to grow while revenues kind of stabilize without the one-time funding that we're seeing kind of in this year. But our fund balance is actually growing. And so our fund balance continues to grow, and our ending fund balance is at 64%. So overall looking really stable financially over the next few years. For SV, we're seeing for next year, we would be proposing a budget of about $593,000 operating income. So I'll go into the details of kind of some of the assumptions over the next few slides, but just kind of high level, we are looking at positive operating incomes in each of future years based on current assumptions. And the fund balance is at 56% of expenses next year, growing to 57% of expenses in future years, assuming all these assumptions stay the same. 22, 23, 23, 24, a lot can change. So it's good that we're seeing kind of stable numbers right now, but it can change depending on how the budgets go over the next few years with the state. In terms of the assumptions, the main assumptions that we're using on the revenue side, we are factoring enrollment growth at both SOC and SV. So this year we were funded based off of budgeted numbers rather than our actual enrollment and attendance. And so even though we're budgeting for higher enrollment at both sites, we are going conservative with the attendance rate. So about 95.5% attendance compared to kind of historical averages, which have been closer, higher, around 97, 98%, just not knowing kind of how things will play out next year as we transition back to full in-person instruction with the just independent study options. So in 22-23, we did assume attendance goes back up to 97%. Historically, we've been higher than that too. So it is still conservative in terms of funding. For the LCFF, we are using the state COLA percentage that was in the May revise, so a 5% COLA for next year, and then 2 and 3% in the following years. For federal and other state revenue, we are factoring one-time funding in 21-22 and 22-23. So there's a lot of different one-time funding sources that you're getting. You can see in 21-22 that we're using all of the one-time funding from the state that's been approved at this point. There is the potential for more one-time funding, so we'll have to see if that gets approved in the budget or not. And then on the expense side, we just factored a 3% COLA for most expenses, unless I highlighted on the next few slides. And then we did have increased staffing for the additional students for next year. And then the retirement costs, so STIRS and PERS, are projected to increase next year. So those are percentages of salaries. So that's the employer cost for these retirement programs.
Can I ask a question before we move slides?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm just curious, back to the enrollment projections and how they go up and then plateau. How is that calculated? And I'm just wondering, do they plateau because we're at capacity at with those numbers, or is there another reason?
Yeah, so they go up a little bit because we're projecting next year to have some more independent study students, because we do have some students who are planning on not coming back in person and will be doing independent study. But basically in the out years, once all students return to campus, we'll be completely at capacity at both campuses. And so basically we can't fit any more kids.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. So in terms of the main changes that we're seeing, so for SOC, so we're seeing kind of a couple $100,000 decrease in terms of the operating income. And this shows kind of the areas we're seeing growth and then where we're seeing kind of the negative impact. So just working left to right, so LCFF revenue between the 5% COLA and the increased ADA, we're seeing almost or a little over 500,000 in revenue, additional revenue from the state. One-time funds, we are budgeting for about $344,000 more one-time funds next year than we have in the budget this year. But some of that is offset with increased expenses in some of these orange bars that we see on the slide. Legal, $215,000 that we've taken out in terms of, we've kind of kept the normal legal budgets for year over year, but we haven't anticipated some of the large payouts that we've seen for this year. And then for other revenue, this is negative $32,000. So there was some one-time revenue that we received in this school year that we're not anticipating for next year. So that is a negative $32,000 from this year to next year, but it was one time, we weren't expecting it to continue. Other expenses, it's a negative $67,000. That is a combination of the COLA adjustment. So seeing about negative, or the 3% increase in expenses kind of on in general across expenses, along with a few adjustments for returning to in-person instruction. So having some additional expenses for things like field trips and things like that. Books and supplies, this is an increase in expense of about $104,000. This includes additional curriculum, computers, technology, along with additional kind of in-person supplies that we would anticipate for next year. So $104,000 increase in expense compared to this year. And then the last two areas are the two big areas in terms of expense increases, which is benefits and compensation. Benefits includes the STRS rate increasing, and it also includes additional benefits for additional staff that we would be hiring. And then the compensation, that's $789,000 in increased staffing. Some of that is funded from the one-time funds, and that some of it's funded from the LCFF revenue with increased enrollment. But some of we've added some positions in terms of teachers, aides, campus supervisors, so student support, counselors, things like that. So we've added some positions into the budget that are driving the increased compensation. We have factored basically step and column increases in terms of wages. So it is primarily driven through increase in FTE. Any questions on this one before SV?
I do have, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dylan.
I did have a couple of questions on the variances. As far as books and supplies, is that also including all the curriculum that we're approving right now? Is that all the new curriculum that we're approving?
Yeah, so that has the new social studies adoption, as well as just our general books and supplies amounts in there that we have every year.
Wonderful. And then the compensation, is that also including all the new positions that were recently approved and any other forecasted positions that will be necessary?
Yeah, so we forecasted in our additional positions that we have flown right now, like bringing back the STEAM teacher position and the director of assessment and accountability, some increased IS positions. So that's why that is kind of an orange negative, because it does take into account all of those additional positions.
And lastly, I don't know if this has been factored in at all, but I know a lot of organizations are kind of factoring in ongoing COVID cost, whatever that may be. Are you factoring that in any way in your expenses?
Yeah, so we have factored in for PPE and cleaning and sanitizing things. We also have, like I said, those increased IS spaces for those students who may be continuing virtual instead of coming back into the classroom. So we've tried to kind of look at the expenditures that we've had for this year through COVID, and forecast what are the same types of things that, even though we're projecting to be back in person all day next year, what are some of the things that are still going to carry over as expenses from this year?
Thank you.
Ms. Brake, the LCFF, that's increase in enrollment, right?
It's
go ahead, sorry.
It's both enrollment and a change in the amount that you're receiving per ADA as it increases by 5% from what you're receiving this year.
And then what is legal? Is that just a reduction in anticipated legal spend?
Yes.
So we had some really big legal payouts over the last couple of years that we had to budget in. And so bringing that down to what a normal year would be if we weren't having some of those big payouts to take care of things that had happened in the past.
And then the last question is, in terms of comp, the amount of money we're getting more from a student enrollment, that's less than what we're getting in terms of an increase in compensation. Do you think this is a one-time deal because we're going up in staff, but the next year it's going to level off, or you think that's going to continue on?
Yeah, because our increases in enrollment are going to level off, and we're replacing a lot of the positions that we lost because of going fully virtual during COVID-19. So we had to bring a lot of those positions back. But because we aren't going to be able to increase in enrollment much past this year, unless we have some sort of expansion plan, it'll level off our number of staff. One thing about that is we are looking to be able to increase our independent study program probably over the next 3 years. So that is a place where we could see some increase in enrollment. We cap out at about 300 independent study students. Right now we're at about 100. So over the next 2 years, we could increase about 200 students in our independent study program. That would then cause us to have to hire some new staff, although it would be dramatically outweighed by the amount of additional LCFF revenue that we would be generating from those students.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move on to the last few slides. So for SV, similar numbers, I'll just point out the differences here. Other revenue is actually less of a change from this year to next year. It's just a $5,000 difference. And that's because the ADA, or the enrollment, and multiplied by the attendance, is basically higher at SV. And so that increases some of the other revenues besides LCFF that offsets that one-time revenue reduction that we are seeing. And then other expenses are a little bit larger at SV, as we're also accounting for assuming that the facility costs, utilities and things like that are higher back to kind of normal previous years, not this last year, in terms of costs. So that's kind of the other differences here, but overall all of the same adjustments in SV compared to SOC. And then the last two slides that I have is just cash flow. So your cash flow projection is looking really strong. So operating income and fund balance are strong, but so is your cash flow. And so overall, seeing that cash balance, I included the 1920 historical, the current year, and then the next year, 2 years. And so essentially you're seeing that your cash balance is increasing. At the end of this year, you have about 4.5 months of cash, basically, to cover 4.5 months of your average expenses to cover. So that's a really solid place to be in. And we're seeing a similar picture for SV. So the same, seeing kind of increases in terms of the cash balance. And even though the overall SV cash balance is lower, the days of cash that you have for your operating expenses is similar. So you have about, at the end of this year, about 4.5 months of your operating expenses that you could cover with your cash balance. So looking pretty stable in terms of cash balances in the future years. We are anticipating a partial deferral in June for next year, but no other deferrals for next year. And that is all I have, unless there's any other questions.
I have another question real quick. Sorry, I might have missed it somehow, but when you're reporting to us by campus, like where do the costs come in for like the administrative staff that like serve both? Like, are they factored in and split between the two basically evenly, or where do we find that in all of this?
So we split everybody up who's a shared staff member or any kind of shared expenses based off of a calculation of ADA at each site. So our enrollment, our total enrollment at SV is about 45% of our total enrollment, and SOC is about 55% of our total enrollment. And so all of those calculations for costs that are shared employees or shared resources, we normally will do on a 45-55 split. So 45% of the cost, because 45% of the students that are generating that ADA come from SV, and then 55% of the cost from SOC. So each year we'll look at what that that number is, that percentage, but it usually stays pretty steady at about 45%, 55%.
So Dr. Amy Smith, just to add, so every invoice that comes in is determined whether it's a SV or an SOC or a shared event, expense. So then it's noted at that time and coded at that time.
Yeah, they're coded into the two different accounts for SV and SOC.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, that takes us to items for action. You approve the purchase of SAVAS, My World Social Studies
Right.
Curriculum.
You missed one. We have an item B for presentation.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, item B. Local control and accountability plan for Open Saddleback Valley. How did I skip that?
And it's actually going to be Dr. Henry who's presenting it.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. We will be reporting and giving an update on both SOC and SV LCAPs. So let me share my screen. Okay, let's see. Trying to find, there it
Dr.
is.
Henry's first time sharing on Zoom, so everybody has to cut her break.
In my previous district, we used 3 different platforms, but not Zoom. So I'm hoping this should be good. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
All right. So again, thank you for the opportunity I think it's still loading, there we go, for presenting on our LCAP and giving you an update. A little bit of information I wanted to provide about our local control funding formula, LCFF. So this was a new formula that was enacted in 2013-14. It was a historic reform to education funding. It really based funding on local control, giving schools or organizations, districts, the opportunity to gather input and really determine how the funding was used without so many limitations with the old formulas. Again, redistributing state education funds, and funding was based on grade levels. So elementary school, junior higher, middle school, and high schools, as well as demographic data for each district, looking at some specific student groups. I'll show a little bit more about that in a minute. And it also, though, with redistributing the funds and redefining how we fund schools, it also created an accountability system for how we serve our students, and in particular, different student groups. So this is a slide that will show you, it came out from West Ed a little bit, just very simply how funding is allocated for LCFF. And there is a per student base amount. And again, adjustments are made based on grade level because they determined that it costs more maybe to run a high school and junior high middle schools than elementary. You have a higher overhead with sports and things like that. Other activities, there's a little bit adjusted funding based on the grade levels that an organization serves, and then also based on the percentage of demographics that are enrolled in the district or the organization. So specifically, our LCFF looks at students who are from families with low income, our English learners, and our foster youth. So those are the specific student groups where the funding is adjusted and increased from the base amount, and that is how they decide how much money to give us. So here's a little bit more information about our local control accountability plan. So that was the funding formula, LCFF, and then the LCAP is the plan that is created to address how this money will be spent and for accountability purposes. So the local control accountability plan, or LCAP, is a 3-year plan, but it is annually updated. So our new cycle begins this year with a new LCAP, and that will cover from 2021 to 2024. Actually, that should say 2022 to 2024. The LCAP, we are encouraged through our LCAP to tell a story. And it's a story of how we support our students, the impact that our support has, and how we are improving over time. And the emphasis is on how we are planning our communication, our engagement with stakeholders. So there's it's a lot more than just a spending plan. It really is a story, should tell our story of how we want to serve our students and where we want to see them grow and improve. But it all is aligned to the projected budget and all proposed expenditures, and they correlate to the OPA SOC and OPA SV budget items. So not only are we to do all of those other things I showed you on the previous slide, but the state of California also puts 8 state priorities that they want us to cover. I know you'll see 10 here. The two kind of light blue on the ends, those are for county offices of education only. So the different state priorities that we have to assure that we are covering and in our LCAPs are basic services, which are kind of buildings and materials, curriculum, implementation of state standards, that our students have course access and they have access to a rich instructional program. And those three are in the bucket of conditions for learning. And then you'll see two other in the red, and those are priorities based on student outcomes. So we have pupil achievement and then other pupil outcomes. Pupil achievement is a lot of your standard metrics. And then other pupil outcomes are things like how they're doing with visual and performing arts, career preparation, and other measures like that. And then you have another kind of bucket of state priorities, which is about engagement. And that includes that we are addressing how we are involving our parents, engaging our community, how our students are engaged, and they use metrics such as attendance, also some discipline data to show that we're engaging our students in a positive way, and then also school climate. So those are our 8 priorities that are also addressed through our LCAP. Go to our next slide. So because we have local control, our LCAP or our plan also reflects our vision. So we know from going through our vision statement that OPA is inspired by higher education. We are also driven by providing our students with global mindedness and those 21st century skills that we were talking about in one of our committees recently about all the different C's of communication, collaboration, character, critical thinking, creativity. We also can have our vision implemented in our LCAP with our strong academic rigor and our desire to create motivated and lifelong learners. And then finally, we can see the multiple intelligences reflected in our LCAP or in our plan, because we know that using the multiple intelligences through our instruction is one of our values here at OPA. So not only do we get to reflect our values and our vision statement and things we believe in, but we also want to make sure that our LCAP reflects stakeholder input and a review of our data and our progress. So here are a few of the things that we have reviewed in the creation of our 2 different LCAPs, which is a separate one for our SOC campus and our SV campus. We had an LCAP parent survey to gather input, student survey, and a staff survey. We looked at progress that we made towards our LCAP goals. Previously, we used our California School Dashboard, which is also aligned to the LCAP process. A lot of the data that we look at is reflected on the school dashboard. Although we did not have one for 2020, we're looking back still at 2019 and where we see ourselves moving forward. We reviewed our other state indicators that aren't on the dashboard, as well as local performance indicators. And actually the local indicators will be presented to the board at the next board meeting on the 24th. Here's a little bit more information about our stakeholder engagement. So there were several stakeholder engagement meetings, and included in those meetings were parents, staff, administrators, and our board of directors. So those were in March, April, and May. We also engaged students, however, through our LCAP survey and some of the other groups where we have student representation, such as our school site council. In those meetings, we had activities where our stakeholders were able to provide input. We analyzed data. I say we, I wasn't here yet, but I went through the plan and I'm very familiar with the process, so I will continue to say we analyzed data, reviewed and revised our goals, and really looked at our different services and our actions and if they're helping us to meet our goals. Other group meetings where the LCAP was presented and input was gathered were our school site council meetings, our ELAC, at our Honor Society meetings with site leadership and staff meetings. And then again, you see the surveys below that were mentioned previously. So here are our 4 goals for the LCAP. And the goal 1 is to increase academic achievement, social emotional strength, and engagement through rigorous, engaging, high-quality curriculum and instruction, utilizing the theory of multiple intelligences. Again, you can see OPA's values and the things that we hold as most important reflected in our goals. Goal number 2 is a highly qualified staff that participates in professional development that is focused on 21st century teaching and learning. Goal number 3 is that we provide a safe, secure, well-equipped learning environment and that they're provided for student activities as well. And then goal number 4, all stakeholders will be engaged in the learning process by promoting a variety of opportunities for parents, students, staff, and the community that strengthen communication and meaningful participation. So we really have a goal for our academic achievement. We have a goal for our staff. We have a goal for our culture and our environment, and then also for our families, our communities, making sure that they're also reflected in our LCAP. So this year, the LCAP was a little different because we did not submit an LCAP in 2019-20. So from our previous LCAP, we had to do an annual update, so for 2 years ago. And then last year, what we presented for this school year was also using the acronym LCAP, which I never could really understand, but we also had to do an annual update of our learning continuity and attendance plan. So both of those had to be addressed this year for the first time, and a lot of reflection that our chancellors did with our site leadership team as well to put these documents together, and then also the creation of the LCAP plan summary, which will be implemented from 2022 to 2024. All right, so looking at our annual update from the 2019-20 LCAP, which was the last one we had written, the way that this is organized is for each goal, which we have 4, that these different tasks need to be addressed. So we have to look at our expected outcomes that we had projected back then for 2 years ago and what our actual outcomes were. So more of a data review. Did we meet our goals? We have to look at, for each goal, the actions and services. How much money did we budget? And then how much money did we actually spend for each of those actions and services? There is a goal analysis where we analyze if we were successful. And then we have to address if there were any services not implemented or services that we modified from the LCAP, a reflection of why did we do that, or how did that work? And then also we get to address for each goal our successes in that area and the challenges that we faced. So here's a little summary. It's a little wordy. I do apologize for that, but I tried to address each goal. So for our annual update for the 2019-20 LCAP, was overall, we found that our students did achieve grade level proficiency in core content areas, and most of our action steps were completed, although we had a hard pivot with the pandemic with COVID-19, and we were not anticipating that when the 2019-20 LCAP was created. So despite the circumstances, we did find that our students achieved grade level proficiency. Synchronous instruction was provided in all core subjects. We continued to support our ELs, our Scholar Academy students, and provide intervention for the students who needed it. For goal 2, we found that our staff continued to collaborate and receive professional learning opportunities despite the pandemic and having to pivot to distance learning in March of 2020. That we were able to maintain safe environments for our students. However, much of the equipment that was projected to be spent to upgrade our sites or infrastructure was actually used to provide students with the equipment that they needed to learn from home. So there was a shift, but we were able to still maintain. And then although many of our activities for parent involvement that were planned for 2019-20 involvement and engagement may have been canceled, that we were able to shift to virtual learning events. And actually it was noted that our attendance in some of these virtual programs actually improved. Here's a little bit more about what the outcomes that we expected at both sites, and then the actual outcomes, as well as the budgeted and actual expenditures. So this is still the annual update for 2019-20 LCAP. So some of the outcomes, we did not have state assessments in 2020. And we did not have that data, and we were projecting that we would show improvement, but then we did not have the assessment. We saw a decline in some of the survey items, which is typical, especially in perception data when we're in a pandemic and it's not the best of circumstances. Some of the expenditure differences that we saw were for goal 1, and these are just a few things. This is outlined in our over 100-page documents for each of our SV and our SOC campuses, but we found that gate testing online came with some savings. We spent a little more money on intervention and social emotional support and independent study options. So where we saved some money on some things, we had to shift and spend them in others. Our expenditures for goal 2, our library media texts were released in March, but internal professional development for staff increased, and the professional development stipends that were planned and in the 2019-20 LCAP, we did not move forward with that. So they were not utilized because of the school closures, and a lot of professional development opportunities in 2020 for educators were canceled. Our expenditures for goal 3, again, I said that in the previous slide, excuse my dog, much of the infrastructure, classroom furniture, security cameras that were planned to be purchased were put off to a later date. And so we did not spend that. Again, our spending more went for our students and to make sure they had the equipment that they needed for distance learning. And then expenditures for goal 4, many of the expenditures for our in-person meetings were not spent due to COVID, and that we had virtual community and parent meetings. So not only did we have to reflect upon our 2019-20 LCAP, but we also then had to do an annual update for the learning continuity and attendance plan, which is what we wrote in 2020 for the 2021 school year. So in that document, our chancellors, our teams had to write reflections about in-person learning, what actions did we take for in-person learning, and an analysis or reflection of how it went. The same for distance learning. So, and since we did both in-person and distance learning in the 2020-21 school year, we had to, our chancellors addressed both in their LCAP documents. Pupil learning loss had to be addressed. So what actions have we taken in the area of pupil learning loss? And then we had to give a more detailed analysis for that piece. We had to break it up. So how have we addressed mental health and social and emotional well-being? How have we addressed pupil and family engagement outreach during, this crazy school year, and also school nutrition, providing for our families who needed it. Also, in the annual update for the learning continuity and attendance plan, we had to write out if there were any additional actions that we had to end up adding to implement the plan, and then analyze overall how did our learning continuity and attendance plans go, and then more analysis of how did the 2020 LCAP and the 2021 continuity plan go. So as you can see, a lot of reflection are built into these updates and plans to make sure that schools are really looking carefully at and districts and organizations at how we're utilizing our resources to provide for students and to meet our goals. And so here's a little bit of a summary. So that was what was included. And this is a brief overview, so that with the return of in-person instruction in October, we did spend more, as would be expected, for PPE, plexiglass, other safety materials than we had projected. But the budgeted funds that we had for technology, laptops, cameras, hotspots, were not completely utilized because there was a reduced to cost and savings for educational organizations. So we had projected to spend a little bit more than we had to. There was also in our annual update an analysis of both the virtual and in-person instructional programs. It showed that both OPA, SOC, and SV are dedicated to providing high quality, rigorous, standards-based instruction to all students, regardless of what model we were in. And a comprehensive assessment plan was developed to determine where each student was progressing, and so that we could meet their needs both during this school year and moving forward into the future, and that we could provide necessary intervention in real time as appropriate. So then the third piece, the final piece, is the LCAP plan summary. Here are all the components that need to go into that plan summary, which again will be implemented from 2022 to 2024. It is a 3-year plan, but we will do an annual update each year. So first, it includes general information and then reflections on our successes and identified needs based on data. They ask for different highlights for each goal in the LCAP, that we look at where we've made progress in each area. We review performance, looking at the dashboard, our stakeholder engagement process, a summary of feedback and local data as well. They look at the goals and actions. We have to have a rationale for each of our goals. We provide baseline data in each area, and then our desired outcomes for 2024. So here's where we are right now, here's where we want to be, and then what actions and services are we going to provide or take to get to that place in 2024. And then we end with how are we utilizing our plan to specifically increase and improve services for those student groups that we mentioned on one of the early slides, for foster youth, English learners, and our students from low income. And so here are just a few of the highlights for each of the goals. So highlights for goal 1, both OPA SOC and OPA SV will increase the social emotional health support over the next 3 years. We will provide social emotional instruction for all students, TK through 8th grade. The core curriculum will continue to be supported with adopted and supplemental materials. We have enrichment and electives such as world languages, music instruction, Taekwondo, STEAM lab, as well as support for our English learners and students in need of academic intervention. They're reflected in the document. And we are bringing a director of student services and accountability to coordinate social emotional learning, mental health, and student engagement activities. Our highlights for goal 2, which remember is focused on staff, that OPA SOC and OPA SV will continue to hire and retain highly skilled staff members. Professional learning will be provided, and that is related to the adopted curriculum and other focus areas, such as the implementation of a multi-tiered system of supports, otherwise called MTSS. We will focus on positive behavioral interventions and supports, called PBIS. This is where you get the alphabet soup of education. We will focus on our multiple intelligences, a writing curriculum, and strategies, continue with strategies to support our English learners. And then also implementation of those professional learning stipends that were brought up for the 1920 but did not happen, which encourage professional growth for our teachers and classified staff. For our highlights for goal 3, is we will continue to hire and retain highly skilled staff members. Is this the same one? It looks like the same one. Let's see, let me move forward. Okay, so highlights for goal 4, sorry about that. Provide increased parent education opportunities and events, as well as opportunities for our parents to get involved, to provide input. We're going to continue to support student recognition events, to support student motivation and engagement. We will continue to have communication tools and media to support clear communication with parents and our community. And then also clubs, sports, and other activities for our students to promote involvement and engagement. So those are the highlights of our plan. With that, I will stop sharing and let me know if you have any questions. Do you have any questions for me?
Oh, come on. No way we don't have any questions. Delight?
Congratulations. This is a lot of work and time and effort, and I really applaud you for all of the effort that you've done. I don't have any questions, though.
I would like to applaud our chancellors who were tasked with, I believe for the first time, with really, and it was a new template too this year. There seems to always be a new template that the state makes us do. So we don't get to just kind of update the plan. It's starting from scratch, and both Chancellor Alvarado and Bridges, they rose to the occasion. They did a fantastic job, and so kudos to them. When working with them and reviewing the document, they did excellent work, and so kudos to them, kudos to the team. I'm just proud that I get to report on all the good work that already happened before I got here. So good job. Good job to the OPA community in providing input, and Dr. Kernan for leading the process.
And to Rosa for dealing with all of the numbers over the last 3 years to try to plug them all in and figure out where they matched up with all of this stuff on the LCAP, because she had to match every single dollar to every single amount spent to every single amount budgeted. So
yes, Rosa, sorry. Thank you.
Without having any background and coming in cold and having to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was a great team effort for sure. Great team effort.
Well, if we could just have, I think, about 4 or perhaps 5 more projects that we can abbreviate LCAP, that would be awesome. Really like to see that. And we can even call that endeavor LCAP. So.
And then, tie it in with LCFF.
And we'll see what we can come up with there. I know.
Okay.
Could I just comment? Sorry, just really quick. Again, I echo that great job. I would just love to make sure to moving forward, and I'm sure it's been done in the past, but that we don't treat this as a silo project. And that we really figure out how to coalesce between that, the strategic plan, what we're doing in the academic outcomes committee, and yeah, make it all, come together, because especially in any place we're collecting so much stakeholder input, and it's deciding what we're doing, that those things aren't done in vacuums, and that we can really utilize the information across the board. And I know that's difficult, but the more we can do, I think, the more effective we can be as well.
I think that's absolutely correct. And really looking at these plans, using them to tell our story and to be used, the information to reflect all of our efforts and our strategic plan and our accountability is absolutely, I think that's a great idea. And thank you for sharing that.
Okay, so that leads us to items for action. Approve the purchase of Savas My World Social Studies curriculum for grades 6 through 8. During the 2020-2021 school year, several 6th through 8th grade teachers piloted 2 different social studies curricula. After comparing these social studies programs, the pilot did not feel either curriculum met the needs of OPA teachers and students. Therefore, they're asking to pilot Savas for the 2021-2022 school year because this was the curriculum overwhelmingly selected by kindergarten through 5th pilot teachers. Because all middle school teachers will be piloting for the entire year, this will be a paid pilot. Savas has agreed to prorate the cost of the materials if we choose to adopt Savas for a multi-year adoption beginning in 2022-23. The one-year purchase of My World for 6th through 8th will cost $41,000 plus any applicable tax. It's recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item A. May I have a motion, pretty please?
I make a motion to approve action item A.
Delight, thank you. May I have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, Delight, thank you. I'm sorry, Danelli. And is anybody going to present on this or talk on it, or can we just ask questions?
I'll just say we presented on Savas the last time for the elementary school adoption. The middle school teachers really went through a rigorous process of trying out 2 different curricula and found that neither one of them really met their needs. And so, out of their due diligence, they really would like to try out this program. We do want to make sure that we have new social studies curriculum for the teachers to use next year. And so that all of our middle school teachers have access to it, we do have to do a paid pilot. However, if we adopt it, we'll do a regular 5-year adoption, and then Savas has agreed to basically prorate us based on the adoption rate. So it would dramatically decrease the cost if we do decide to go forward with that adoption. And because it was so overwhelmingly selected by our K-5 teachers, it is, and our 6th through 8th grade teachers, a lot of them have looked at the material. So it is very likely that they will wind up adopting it in the end.
So what does prorating mean?
So usually they give us a discount so for our elementary curriculum, it was, I think, $143,000 for a 5-year adoption. If we bought it year by year, it would have been about $60,000 for that first year. So this is a much higher cost right now to pay upfront. But if we do adopt it, then instead of it being 5 times 41,000, I think they were coming out to about 130,000 for the 5-year adoption. So we'll get an additional 4 years just for the difference between the 41 and the 130,000.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. I think we can do a roll call vote here. So then how about Delight? You made our motion, so I'll call you. How about that?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Danelli?
Aye.
Okay, this motion passes unanimously. Item number B, act for action, approve board policy 5131.2 bullying. It's mandated that schools adopt policies regarding bullying prevention strategies and incorporate these strategies into their comprehensive school safety plan. It's recommended that the board of directors approve action item B. May I have a motion, please?
I motion to approve action item B.
Thank you, Amy. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, anybody going to present on this, or are we going to talk more about it?
Just kind of briefly, it is mandated that we have a board policy and plans within our school safety plans regarding bullying. we already have those bullying plans within our safety plans, but we do need to have a board policy that that sort of, you know, incorporates all of our strategies and says that it is a priority of our board and our organization to make sure that we are preventing bullying, and that we do have policies and procedures around making sure that we're handling any types of bullying incidents appropriately.
So Dr. Kannan, I have a question. So how do I know that we have all the board policies that are required? I mean, like, how are we determining that, oh, this was a gap, therefore we need to adopt it and put it into the board meeting? Like, I don't understand the process.
So there's a California School Boards Association has a manual that denotes all of the different mandated board policies, and they also have legally vetted sample policies that most school districts and other schools use for those board policies. We just kind of take those templates and then adapt them to our school and our specific policies and procedures. And so right now I'm going through that manual and making sure that we have not only all of the appropriate policies or the mandated policies, but also that our policies have been updated since the last update in any type of ed code. So every time the education code changes or the CCRs change, CSBA puts out an alert stating which policy it is and what different parts of those policies have changed, and how schools should update their board policies to make sure that they're meeting those mandated policy requirements. So so instead of, you know, putting a whole bunch, a lot of these are updates. Some of them are suggested policies, but we do want to make sure that we have all of the mandated policies. So like I said, I think, you know, a few board meetings ago, we're going to probably have a few policies on each board meeting coming up, so that we make sure that we hit all of those policies. And if you look at any other school or school district board agenda, they normally have board policies on every agenda because there are so many different updates, and so many, you know, ed code will state that there's new mandated policies and things coming out. So so I'm just keeping an eye on that and making sure that we're in compliance with all of those.
And what's the significance of each of the numbers? Does that mean we have 5,131 policies and this is the second version, or how did we come up with a numbering for it?
So there's a policy numbering system that the California School Board Association uses, and they're in the thousands. So there's 1,000 board policies and 2,000s and 3,000s, 4,000s, denoting whether they have to do with classified personnel or certificated personnel or instruction or students or organizational kind of administrative board policies. And it allows everybody to have kind of a uniform system so that you can compare policies, you know, throughout the state of California, and so that you can easily reference policies based on their policy number. That policy number is the same for every school in California for their board policies.
So then if there's a 0.2, then that's like we had a version and we're updating it. Is that how I should think about it?
It's
so
usually that there wasn't, like, say there's a policy on student discipline, and then there's a more specific policy on bullying, or a more specific policy on a specific piece of student discipline. So it's usually not the update. The update comes in basically the date that it's updated at the bottom, but it would be that there is another kind of sub policy under that general policy category.
And all of this sit in our website, the board policies?
It does. It sits on our board page. So we have an overall heading for our Board of Education, and then under there we have a subheading for all of our board policies. We used to kind of have them just listed out kind of randomly. So we're organizing those into those specific numerical categories, so that, again, they're easily referenced, and it's easy to be able to make sure that we have all of those required policies.
Paul, you good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Delight?
Aye.
Amy Smith,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Jackson's aye, Danelli.
Aye.
This motion carries unanimously. Action item C, approved board policy 4040, employee use of technology. This board outlines policies for acceptable use of technology by OPA employees. It's recommended that the board of directors approve action item C. May I have a motion, pretty please?
I make a motion to approve action item C.
Thank you, Danelli. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Delight. Okay, anybody gonna talk about this a little bit?
So this is similar to the last item, but this policy, and I try to put the policies kind of in order of what's the most important for right now. So the acceptable use policy, and then the next student technology use policy, those are going in both of our handbooks, our student handbook and our employee handbook coming up. And so we wanted to make sure, especially in light of all of the technology that's being used through COVID and virtual learning, we wanted to make sure that we had those policies updated to reflect the latest legal mandates and education code and cybersecurity and technology use issues, so that they were able to be placed in the handbooks and ready for use next year. And these actually go along, our employees and our students will actually sign acceptable use policy that goes along with each one of these to denote that they understand what those technology rules are.
Okay.
Sure.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, sorry, I have a question. So this is maybe not directly related to the policy, but the policy speaks about this, and I think it's not urgent, but I think we should figure out a way to make our branding consistent all the way from websites to PowerPoint presentation. I mean, even our internal presentations in the board meetings, every presentation is very different, and somehow we got to normalize all of it so that people have a consistent view of if you have the OPA logo, if you have OPA colors, what's the RGB? I think now that we are a mature organization and we're starting to think about this will become part of strategy as well. But if the staff can start thinking about how to normalize templates so that everybody, all the chancellors, Dr. Henry, Rosa, when you do a presentation, all of it sort of normalizes. And then when our teachers do it also, I mean, you could have a playful template, you could have a formal template, that's fine, but the underlying brand should be the same. And I know you speak about it, that's why I was bringing it up. But I know you guys have a lot of things in your plate, but maybe this is a summer project that somebody could take on, or maybe the new executive assistant or something like that, right? Let's figure out.
Yeah, and we've actually been talking about that as being a summer project. And now that we've brought on Dr. Henry, we're bringing on our executive assistant. So that is something that we're looking at, not just being able to have consistent presentations, letterhead, logos, as well as our social media platforms having a consistent look there, and looking at what those different logos and what those different styles will be. So kind of having a style guide for OPA, as well as that consistent letterhead and things like that. So that is already on our plate for a summer project. In fact, Dr. Henry and I were talking about that yesterday or today. So so good suggestion.
Is that something that's going to come through the strategy? I mean, are you guys going to put something together and then strategy would see, like, how do we work with strategy to make sure that we're all focused in the same direction and doing things together?
I think probably for the logos, we'll probably create something and then bring it to the strategy and development committee kind of for final approval. I don't know if we can really create all of those things as a committee. That would be more of something that the staff would create, and then we would bring it through the strategy and development committee.
Yeah, I also think there's Janelle, I almost think there is a two-pronged approach. First is what we have today, let's normalize it, right? It doesn't matter, I mean, if we choose to change a vision or choose to adopt some new ideas in 6 months or whenever we finish, the work that we're doing, we'll have to do it. But I think there is an urgency to make sure that all of us are speaking the same language, right? And I think this is part of the old OPA, right? Everybody had a, I don't know what we bleed OPA blue or whatever that.
Teal, man, teal.
Teal, excuse me, whatever. So see, exactly, right? Even a board member can articulate it well. So I think it's important. And so I would encourage us to not create anything new, but let's kind of normalize to what we think and get the right people all approved and so on. And, we got to tie it back to this notion of a new mascot in the two campuses and all of that stuff. We got to figure out how to tie everything together. And then, when I'll give a simple example. If you're drawing a mascot, let's make sure that we also think about how to be professional about it, right? Let's get ideas from the students and so on. But this is like important, right? I mean, so, if we have to go hire somebody to do it professionally, so I think we can do that, but then deny to your point, if something changes, then we should be able to adopt it. But I would rather that we try to make progress on this, what we have, right? And then normalize all of the things, right? So it feels like that's important. So
I couldn't agree with you more, Paul. I think it's really, really important that we do it exactly as you say. Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right. So let's do a roll call vote for action item C, board policy for employee use of technology. Delight?
Aye.
Amy Smith?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Raymond, aye. Danelli?
Aye.
This motion carries unanimously. Item number D for action, approve board policy 6163.4, student technology use. It's recommended the board of directors approve action item D. May I have a motion, pretty please?
I make a motion to approve it with a minor edit that I can bring up later.
Excellent. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, Paul, what do you think? What do you think?
I think that there's just there's something, I think it still says CSBA sample in page 250.
Oh, okay.
You just have to remove it, but everything else looks good. It's just a minor edit.
Yeah, and we'll actually put it, we have a normal format that we put the board policies in. So as soon as it's approved and the draft comes off, then we put it in that format as well.
And I just kind of had another comment kind of following up with what Paul was talking about. I know that like this policy in particular is put in the handbook. And I think one thing that might be helpful is I know you only put a couple of the policies in the handbook, but even in the handbook itself, referencing that there's other policies to see on the website. I think that anywhere we can kind of make sure that people understand that it's not just these ones, but really kind of integrate it more would be great. Because there's a lot of policies that we've done, but a lot of people aren't aware of it.
Yep. And luckily for this one, there's also that acceptable use agreement that the student signed, but you're right, we can definitely reference, especially in the employee handbook, a lot of these kind of pertain to employees as well, reference those board policies. I think I already pretty much talked about this one, so.
All right. All righty then. So then we'll do a roll call vote. Delight?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. And Danelli?
Aye.
Okay, this motion as amended passes unanimously. Action item E, approve board meeting dates for 2021-2022 school year. It's recommended the board of directors approve action item E. May I have a motion, pretty please?
I make a motion to approve action item E, but I do want to discuss it.
We'll happily do that. May I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, let's discuss it. What are you thinking, Delight?
One of the things that I know we've been talking about for a while is more predictability at board meetings. And I think one thing that would be really helpful as this calendar is put together is to make sure that there's an additional column that really covers, what are going to be the key milestones of those meetings. For example, I know the next meeting we're approving the budget. For me, we shouldn't have even had to have the special meeting tonight because it should have been the public hearing should have been handled at the last mealing.
Actually, so, we have to have a public hearing for those 2 weeks before the board meeting. So this was actually a regular meeting. It was a regularly scheduled meeting. It wasn't a special meeting. Those are requirements for the LCAP and the budget to have it 2 weeks prior.
So that's set up for next year in the next year cycle.
Yes, it's set up every year. We do these 2 meetings in June every year, just because that's a mandated requirement. But I also have a calendar that's in the, I think I may have already put it in the board folder, that kind of outlines by each month what those things that we're going to be covering. If we know that there are things that we cover every single year in the board calendar, that way you guys will know what's coming up and kind of those big pieces that happen every single year and which month they'll happen in.
Where is that in the board folder?
I think I added it in. Let me just make sure. I know I have it. I'm not sure if I actually added it into the board folder yet, but
I think that kind of, again, the more that we can be more predictable on these things, I think the better it will be for all of us.
Yeah, it's in there, right in the beginning of the board folder. When you click on the board meeting materials, it says monthly calendar of standing board items.
And I have a couple questions too. Can we make sure that we publicize that these board meeting dates, so that the community gets to? I mean, I'm looking around and I think we have one parent who has joined us. So so I know that it depends on topical stuff, so it might be useful to do that. Second comment I have is, Dr. Curran, everywhere you've said it's going to be virtual. Is that our strategy, that we're going to keep it virtual through the end of next academic year?
I left it in as virtual because that's what we are kind of right now, and I don't know when that's going to switch back. So if the governor's kind of waiver against having the in-person meetings and the ability to have them virtual changes, then we would have to amend that. But right now, because we're still virtual, I just put them tentatively in as virtual meetings. Okay, and then also I applaud your effort to streamline these board meetings. I think 8:23, and obviously most of our constituents cannot come, right? It's late in the evening for kids and so on. But I applaud your effort to try to make it more and more streamlined. I'm actually noticing the differences from before my first board meeting to the second board meeting. So congratulations on that. I would say let's continue to find ways to, let's continue to challenge why, for example, we need two separate motions and discussions for 2 campuses. I mean, maybe there's a legal reason, but I've done where you say, we're going to take a consent for items A, B, C, and D, right? And for example, the policies, we could have done all 3 together and had discussions, but we could have taken a motion. So I would encourage you to challenge those things and see if it's possible to continue to streamline, so Raymond doesn't have to read as much. And then, also presentations, right? I mean, I would encourage us to ask ourselves, hey, for example, has the board had a chance to do a pre-read? And if the board has read it already, then we don't need to listen to the presentation again. Again, if there's a statutory reason why these presentations need to happen, no problem. But otherwise, it's like, hey, you've sent us the pre-read. Maybe all board members can commit to at least flipping through it. Then we can go to the Q&A portion of it sooner, rather than having, a lot of presentations on every topic, right? So again, a thought for you guys to consider as we try to continue to streamline our board meetings. And we have to find space for academic outcomes committee. We have to find space for strategy committee in our board meetings. And the only way to do that is to kind of reduce the administrative burden on these board meetings as well. So something for us to consider as well, please. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for action item E. Delight?
Aye.
Amy Smith?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Raymond, aye. Danelli?
Aye.
All right, this motion carries unanimously for action item E. Action item F, approve annual goals for the executive director. The Open Board of Directors, in collaboration with the executive director, create annual goals for the ED that align with the mission, vision, and goals of the organization. These goals are used to annually evaluate the executive director. So the evaluation happens annually. Even though we might meet and talk, we will meet and talk more frequently than annually. It's recommended the Board of Directors approve action item F. May I have a motion, pretty please?
I make a motion to approve action item F.
Thank you, Danelli. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Amy Smith. Let's chat about it.
I have a question just about the way this is written, and then our ability to adjust within a year versus having to do an adjustment annually, if that makes sense. So as we know, like as our strategic plan is created, as different things come up, like a pandemic, expectations could shift a little bit. Obviously, you know, we'll keep things pretty aligned to those major buckets that we talked about. But I'm just wondering, like, can we pivot still within voting on, or we'd have to come back here and vote on any changes? How does that work?
Well, my sense of this would be that even in a pandemic, they're still going to fall kind of into those buckets, and then kind of the A thing. So we're not managing at the micro level, we're managing at the macro level. So when we talk about staff development, we talk about some of those other items, it's not saying, hey, you have to produce this particular result. So lots of things could be rolled in there. And then as well, I feel like we also need to be careful that we don't give Amy some goals and then move the punch bowl around throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, it's like, well, based on the goals you gave me 60 days ago, I probably didn't do so good. You know what I mean? So we don't want to do that either. So I guess I'm not super concerned about her being off track, because again, we're managing at a very high level to say, hey, how does that happen helping organizational development? And so there's lots of things that can be folded into organizational development. Clearly, based on the weighted percentages, that's something that's very, very important, is to flush out the organization, fill those seats up with super qualified people. We see that happening already. Just kind of my 2 cents about that.
And I'm not so much concerned. I guess I'm more just wanting to clarify, what does this mean to vote on this? And then what are we allowed to do? Or we just come back and amend, and that has to be done in a board meeting. Like, how much wiggle room do we have? And I agree, we would not want to change anything dramatically. That's not appropriate or fair. So
I think the key metrics and key activities are more just, you know, kind of areas that could fall under those categories, definitely not completely comprehensive. So I think the goals that you guys are really evaluating on are those main kind of focus area goals, which, like to Raymond's point, really wouldn't change regardless of what happens. You know, there's still going to be academic achievement and staff development and organizational leadership, things like that. So I think, you know, kind of to Raymond's point, it's really focusing on those main focus area goals, and then with those examples, you know, for you guys underneath of different metrics that could be used, or different key activities that could be used.
And then let's say we get, you know, a pandemic is a great example, I feel like, Amy. But if we say, hey, how was academic achievement within the pandemic? What was the school climate like in the pandemic? How were communications in the pandemic? How was our organizational leadership? Did we continue, you know, doing a great job in there? And how fiscally, how did we manage that? Were we applying for grants and applying those toward all these extra additional expenses? You know, those kinds of things. So I think even as, you know, these fibrillations occur in the economy and in life, I feel like as long as we're setting the pace at the high level to say, these are the things that matter most, not that other things don't matter, but we have to pick the things that matter most, and we weighted those. So I feel like we did I know we spent a lot of time thinking about this and trying to make sure, you know, this was important. I know we talked a lot to, you know, members of the, you know, parents and staff members about, you know, what makes an effective ED. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. But I guess to answer your question precisely, Amy Smith, I don't feel like we're going to be back here on a quarter over quarter adjusting these, the 20%, 10%, 15%, 20%. I don't feel like we're going to be doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I still want to know what we're allowed to do or what this locks us into, which I think I'm maybe not asking the question I have in my mind, like in an articulate way. Because I agree with the sentiment. The plan is not to change these. Like we've spent a lot of time, but I still want to understand what are we allowed to do, even if we don't plan to.
Here's what I would say, just from a process perspective. Tonight, this action item in my mind signifies that the board, takes its responsibility seriously and is for the community sharing that, these goals exist for the current executive director. And to your question, Dr. Amy Smith, I would say, if there's a material change, then I would expect this board to get back together in a public setting and talk about it, or a workshop if there's something that materially changes. There's kind of a reasonableness factor here. And with all the work of the workshop that Mr. Jackson just mentioned and the work that I know that you've done as a group, I believe that we're on target. We've weighted it. We'll have that opportunity at the mid-year review period evaluation to tweak things if we need to. I think that's an opportunity to say, we're on course, or we need to, look at changing something based on maybe some external, conditions or factors. So this is pretty standard in my experience. And to Mr. Jackson's point, I don't think typically they're changed because these are very high level, right? And we have confidence in our executive director to do all those supporting work and the staff to support the strategic plan, to support her goals. So that's my comment for all of you.
Okay. Amy, I don't feel like you didn't get the answer that you were looking for. I feel like part of that question was, what can we do? And David gave us the reasonableness answer. But I also feel like if things were wildly different, if, I don't know, for some reason, we had a chance to open new campuses or whatever, then it might make sense to say, hey, Amy, let's come back to the table and sit down and say, maybe we reweight these things out. 50% is now this. Understanding that she only has a half a year to work on it, but these are your new goals. And so based on between now and the end of the evaluation period, we would expect your behavior to be in conformity with these new objectives. And, and we wouldn't want to see that. So I don't feel like this is locking us into anything other than, kind of the professional commitment to saying, hey, these are what we're about. You're clear about that. And if there's ever a change of heart, we're all going to come back to the table and revisit, and I feel like that's the part that's, maybe we've not done or been maybe distracted enough that we've not been able to do this so well. So, okay. Delight, you have anything? Paul? Danelli? Okay, well then, if we have no further questions, then we'll do a roll call vote for action item F, annual goals of the executive director. Delight?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Danelli?
Aye.
Okay, action item F carries unanimously. Action item G, approve additions to Oxford Preparatory Academy 403B plan investment options. The board of directors approved the original 403B plan with nationwide investment options. Expanded investment options will include the CalSTRS Pension 2 pre-tax and CalSTRS Pension 2 Roth, as well as Vanguard pre-tax and Vanguard Roth. These additional options allow for a more diversified choice for employees. It is recommended that the board of directors approve action item G. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve G.
Thank you, Amy. May I have a second?
Second.
Excellent. Thank you, Delight. So we want to have a little conversation about this looks pretty awesome to me. David, you want to talk about this at all?
I'll share. I'll take this one very quickly. In 2018, the board approved for us to change third-party administrators to Schools First, which is well known and used by many school districts. That was a good decision. At that time, we had an existing nationwide vendor plan. And this is simply adding, kind of based on some employee comments that we received, that they like to have more choice. And for those who are looking to augment their STRS or PERS retirement, this is a way to save. And as you see in the materials that are there that are pretty dry that were provided to you, that's why we didn't pull anything else. Those retirement plans sometimes provide only 60% of current salary upon retirement. So this is a way for employees to do some potential strategic financial planning that may augment their pensions. So that's the purpose here. More choice.
All right.
Good, I believe. And no cost to OPA.
I love it. Okay. So we are, any additional questions about action item G, additions to the 403B plan investment options? All right, well, let's do a roll call vote then. Delight?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Raymond, aye. Danelli?
Aye.
Action item G carries unanimously. And action item H, approve the adoption of Oxford Preparatory Academy 547B deferred comp plan. This 457 government plan is an additional offering for employee savings and investment benefit, which may enable employees to augment funding retirement. The inception for Oxford Preparatory Academy includes the 457B Schools First agreement and the 457B adoption agreement for eligible governmental entities. It is recommended that the board of directors approve action item H. May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve action item H.
Thank you, Danelli. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, David, you ready?
Yes, sir. Similarly, OPA at some point in its past offered a 457 plan to employees. It went away at one point, so we're adding it back in as an additional benefit for employees, essentially, along the same lines as the last item. It's an additional way for employees to possibly save for their retirement and a tax advantage status.
Okay. Any additional questions about action item H? Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Delight?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Raymond, aye. And Danelli?
Aye.
Okay, action item H carries unanimously. Action item I, approve memorandum of understanding between OPA and Concordia University for counseling fieldwork. OPA is partnering with Concordia University to provide educational fieldwork opportunities to students enrolled in Concordia's pupil personnel services credential program. This partnership will provide OPA with counseling interns or master's degree students who will be supervised by our credentialed counselors. These student interns will support our mental health and social and emotional learning activities at the school campuses. It's recommended that the board of directors approve action item I. May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Paul.
action item
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Amy. Okay. I'd like to hear about this.
So we are partnering with Concordia. We have had counseling interns in the past from NYU. They actually have a satellite program out here. And they're really a great way to sort of expand our ability to provide, classroom presentations, work with students, but under the strict supervision of our counselor or counselors, because we're going to have hopefully a counselor at each site. So this really allows us to provide a lot more services, as well as having those counseling interns that we can, possibly utilize in the future. and really help to build the capacity of our own counselors, who also get to do a lot of professional development through the program, but also helping to build the capacity of counseling interns as well, and then just be able to dramatically increase the amount of services that we can provide to our students. So this has really worked out in the past, and so we're looking at expanding both of this, as well as looking at expanding some of our other partnerships with surrounding universities for student teachers, possibly psychology interns. So just really building up those partnerships with our surrounding colleges and universities to be able to increase the supports that we have for our students.
Okay.
May I add something?
Yeah.
So we also, I think this is very unique, and I was happy to see Eva had set up interviews so that before we bring someone on as an intern, because we know that could be a mixed bag sometimes, that there actually is a selection process, and we are vetting the person, not just in the normal way. Of course, there's fingerprints and all of that is done, but also making sure that it's a great fit with our current department and the services that we offer. So I was very impressed by that extra step in working with these counseling interns.
Okay.
Do it any other way.
Thank you for adding that. No, because I just have it in my head that, some young person is in there, and, you have this more amateurish kind of person there, and it's a very tender age, right? Things need to go well, and you want the 18 there. So I feel a lot better knowing that there's some pre-work being done to make sure that you really are getting the folks who are kind of at the end of their development, and they're just polishing, rather than, somebody who's really going to make them fall down in front of a student. I don't want that.
And we definitely have a lot of supervision from our counselors. So the more intensive counseling services and one-on-one counseling, things like that, that's provided by our own credentialed counselors. So so these interns are usually providing more of like the classroom-based activities and instruction and things like that. So not usually providing the more intensive services.
Okay. Good. I feel a lot better about that. Thank you.
Related to that, can I just ask about the evaluation criteria for partnering? Because it doesn't sound like we've worked with Concordia before, but correct me if I'm wrong. If we are new to working with them, like, what does that evaluation look like? To like, is this an institution, a program that we want to work with and be associated with?
So we do look at the program that they're offering. We look at kind of their overall, we make sure that they are an accredited college or university, and that they are able to recommend their counseling interns, or if it's teachers, that they are able to recommend them through CTC for their actual credentials and have all of the accreditations and to be able to do that. And then we also look at what other pieces are provided as part of their program. I know we're looking at possibly partnering with another university and this is just because it's on my mind because we did it this week, for student teachers. And so, we usually meet with the representatives. We also look at what types of professional development or supports they provide for our master teachers or for our counselors along, so that it's not just they're sort of dropping their students off and leaving them here. But just to make sure that they have a comprehensive program that involves monitoring from the university, as well as providing supports to our staff who are working with their interns or their student teachers. So we do try to really make sure that it's going to be a good fit with whatever college or university we're working with, and also that they have a good comprehensive support system for their students, as well as for our staff that's going to be working with them.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, so we're going to do a roll call vote for action item I, memorandum of understanding between OPA and Concordia. Delight,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Raymond, I, Danelli.
Aye.
Okay, action item I carries unanimously. 12, community input on non-agendized items. The public may comment on items not listed on the agenda that are within the legal purview of the Board of Education. Okay, do we have any community input on non-agendized items?
We do not.
All right, item 13, adjournment. It's recommended the board adjourn the regular meeting of the Oxford Preparatory Academy Board of Directors on June 10, 2021. May I have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn our regular board meeting.
Thank you, Paul.
Delight.
May I have
Second.
a second? Hey. The lights
Nice
all over.
jumping in on that one.
Okay, do this. So Delight?
Yes.
Aye. We're gonna do a roll call vote on adjournment.
Aye.
Delight, you're good?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Jackson, I, Danelli?
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned at 8:47 p.m. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night,
Hello.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Au revoir.